invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Kate?
Thank you, Scott. Let's bow our heads. Dear Lord, when we honor vocations as a way people serve you in the world, we are thankful for those who feel a calling to start new things, new businesses, new products, and new initiatives. Entrepreneurs are like artists, and perhaps more than any other vocation, they have the opportunity to model what God did in Genesis. Create something out of nothing, bring structure to the unknown, and ultimately call it good. Lord, it is a great honor to create things, and that creative gift comes from you. We thank you for those with the wiring, the risk tolerance, and the willingness to create. We ask for your help with the incredible stress and isolation that can come from this calling as they dream about products and processes, adjust plans, seek funding, serve customers, create cultures, and find ways for sustainability. Lord, we thank you for every entrepreneur and risk taker in our city, because the best way to strengthen culture is to create new opportunities, productive engagements, and prosperous futures for everyone who defines and identifies with that culture. And entrepreneurs are creators. May they be used as part of the exciting story for Birmingham and beyond. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thanks for that invitation. Very appropriate words for today. All right, I'd now like to invite J.W. Carpenter to come up for announcements and introductions of guests. J.W.
Thank you, President Scott. So this is today, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Top 40 Under 40 alumni, great event. Thanks to Ty West for sharing it. These are always first-rate events from the Birmingham Business Journal. If you were once top 40 under 40, or just know someone who was, or just like to go out, need somewhere to be before you go home, come to Top Golf tonight. Should be a fantastic event. And then, hot topic I know around the Kiwanis Club is how we educate teachers. So, EdChat series, we have a conversation about teacher residencies and how we are making sure that all of our aspiring teachers have what they need to be successful here and elsewhere. 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. at Glen Iris Elementary School. We will feed you. It is a terrific event, and I'm looking forward to it. Just like I'm looking forward to today's talk, primarily because I don't have to eat on stage, which I really appreciate. But I've known Mickey for 8 years, and since he was a terrific teacher in Sumter County, and I've gotten to know Matt over the last 2 years, and their work they're doing in this community is really cool and really impactful. And I'm very excited that we're going to get to hear about it today, and that we have a good crowd for it. We're actually going to introduce guests this week, so we're going to flip it around. And so I'm going to call your name, and when I call your name, please stand up with your guest. Caroline McLean has a guest. And who is your guest? Sorry.
This is Jason McLean, the CFO of the YWCA and a veteran of influence through the BBJ.
Matt Campbell has a guest.
Hey, good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce Scott Clark. Scott's a colleague of mine from our BBJ Compass days. He's an executive recruiter in the market, and this is his first visit to Kiwanis.
Great. Tyler O'Connor has a guest.
Very pleased to have my friend Keith Buckner. Keith is a partner at Brookline Capital, a private equity and transaction advisory firm here in Birmingham.
Victor Brown, I think, has a couple of guests.
I have two guests. Brian, the Alabama Regional Director of Capital Relations, and my other guest is an entrepreneur similar to the one that just got praised about. His name is McGill Duggan. McGill is head of operations for Juice. Juice is a point-of-sale kiosk manufacturer.
Cam Benoit has a guest.
My guest is Autumn Seafray. She's the new dean of the School of Education at UAB.
And we have a couple of guests for the Birmingham Southern Circle K. Where are you? Thank you so much for being here. And let's give a warm round of applause to all of our guests. And with that, I turn it back over to President Scott.
Get some exercise today, going up and down those steps. All right, thanks JW, and welcome to all of our guests here today. Great to see another good crowd. Really looking forward to this conversation with Matt and Mickey today. I know it's going to be, I promise you, it'll be a high energy conversation and definitely a very relevant and important topic for us in Birmingham, Alabama. But before we get to that, we have another new member introduction this week. So I'd now like to call Chuck Holmes to the podium to introduce new member Al Wood. Chuck?
Thank you, Scott. Al and I did not get the memo about no neckties. I should have known. Entrepreneurs, Kiwanis, don't wear a necktie. You get it. It's my pleasure to welcome Al Wood as the newest member of the biggest and best Kiwanis club in the world. If you're fortunate enough to already know Al, you know he's an outstanding nonprofit leader. He represents the interests of military veterans throughout Alabama. Al spent most of his career demonstrating his exceptional leadership skills in uniform as a U.S. Army officer serving at home and in harm's way. Al is a native of Birmingham and he's the regional director for Still Serving Veterans, a nonprofit that helps veterans find employment. Al graduated from Alabama. Roll Tide. Come on. Al graduated from Alabama with a degree in business administration and was commissioned through ROTC. The Army took him from Tuscaloosa around the world, and in 2010 he retired from the 3rd Army at Fort McPherson, Georgia. Al tells me that he might be on the golf course in Georgia were it not for his children, who went on to have grandchildren, and they live in Birmingham, and that's what drew Al and his wife DJ back here. Grandchild number 4, due in July. But Al's involved in more than golf. He's involved in the community very heavily. He serves on the governor's task force for veterans and opioids. He chairs the Greater Birmingham Regional Community Veterans Engagement Board. I got to know Al a few years ago when I first arrived in Birmingham. He's a hard worker and he's just about everywhere in the community. And last year I asked Al, a political conservative, fair characterization, to be a guinea pig of mine in a program we're doing where we pair up liberals and conservatives and record their conversations to try and find civil discourse in this day and age, and apparently it went well. No fisticuffs, and in fact it got national attention. And Al's conversation was written up in an article in the Washington Post earlier this year. I should have known Al was perfect for that role because he grew up in Fairfield. He played Little League with Doug Jones. They were fraternity brothers in Alabama, so clearly the guy knows how to get along with people, Democrats, Republicans, whoever it is. Al is sponsored by me and fellow Kiwanis members Dan Pyle and Ed Smith Jr., who's out there somewhere. Dan couldn't be here today. And I would like you all to help welcome Al Wood as a member of Kiwanis.
So Al, welcome to the club. Hope you'll get quickly engaged in one of our committees so we can get you fully acclimated to the club. We're really excited to have you part of the Birmingham Kiwanis Club. All right, so now on to the program. So today what we're going to do is I'm going to do a fireside chat with our guests today about who are going to talk about how the Alabama Futures Fund seeks to be the first significant investment in early stage companies who've identified, 1, a critical customer problem, and 2, are working towards a product market fit. They will share with us the critical role seed stage venture capital plays in fostering startups and supporting entrepreneurial activity for the future economic development in Alabama. So while I read their bios, I'm going to ask Matt Hottle and Mickey Millsap to join me up here on the stage, get their microphones on, and then I'll get my mic on, and we'll start this conversation. So first, Matt Hottle is a partner and co-founder of Red Hawk Venture Group, a trio of companies that support startups and manage venture capital funds. His latest endeavor, Red Hawk Advisory, manages the Alabama Futures Fund, Alabama's first seed stage venture capital fund. The fund has already been recognized as Alabama's most active VC by Crunchbase, with a portfolio of startups that include Dr. Wellington, Junco, and Case Status. His goal is not only support Alabama startups, but also bring startup talent to the state by building a best-in-class infrastructure for entrepreneurs. Matt is originally from Baltimore and is a graduate of the University of Delaware. Go Blue Hens. All right. Mickey Millsap, the other co-founder and partner of Red Hawk Advisory. Mickey's career has included time as a corporate banking analyst at Bank of America, a political staffer for U.S. Senator Tom Daschle, and as a co-founder of uship.com, a venture-backed company he started in business school. Mickey came to Alabama in 2011 as a Teach for America, where he taught high school science for 2 years in Sumter County. Mickey moved to Birmingham full-time in 2014 and has been active in the startup ecosystem as an instructor at the Collapse School of Business at UAB and a founder of K-12's Lean Labs, a nonprofit that does work around the intersection of innovation and K-12 education. Mickey is a 1997 graduate of Florida State University, where he earned a degree in finance, and a 2004 MBA graduate from the University of Texas at Austin. All right. Mickey lives in the Crestwood neighborhood with his wife Rebecca, a speech pathologist, and their 2-year-old daughter Maya. And here's a really interesting fact for you. In 2017, Mickey was elected to the Birmingham Board of Education, where he represents District 5. Thank you for your service to that. So please join me in welcoming
I might add, I understand my superintendent was here last week.
That's correct.
And I understand she got a standing ovation.
That is correct.
She reminded me of that this morning. No pressure, guys.
Yeah, really. I'll get this thing figured out. All right, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so after reading those bios, so give us a little bit of color of how each of you ended up in Birmingham specifically. Why? What brought you here? Matt?
So luckily, I was actually recruited here. So by somebody who's in the audience, I don't know where Lee McKinney is. There he is. So Lee and his family actually recruited me here from Atlanta to come and actually help him start a company or a wing of their company, a portfolio of their company. And so that was, almost 12 years ago, and I moved here 10 years ago.
Okay.
So that's what specifically brought me here.
Okay. Mickey?
Yeah, so I can pretty much blame every bit of me being in Alabama on J.W. Carpenter. And I'm not the only one probably in this town that can say that. So I was living in Austin, Texas, doing the startup thing, decided I was going to take on a challenge of fixing public education, because that's easy. Figured out very quickly I didn't know anything about public education, and said I need to kind of go do what an entrepreneur does and go learn it. I'd come from the entrepreneurial space. So at age 36, I applied to do Teach for America and did not know where I was going to go. Said I'd go anywhere in the country. They said, you're going to Alabama. I said, I don't know about that. I like Austin, Texas. Rural Alabama seems not really my thing. 35-minute conversation with JW, and I was ready to run through a wall for him. So came to Alabama in 2011 when I was deciding where to move. It was around 2013 when I was finishing. We'd sold part of the company. I was going to go back and do another startup in Austin, then I kind of started spending more time in Birmingham. And for me, that was just starting to see the beginnings of what the startup ecosystem here looked like. And I thought, go there and build something, be part of something, or go back to where it's already been done before. So that was a pretty easy decision. A little harder getting my wife to move from New Orleans, but that's another story.
Okay.
She now loves it and never wants to leave. So.
As a lot of people do come here, right?
That's right.
I guess you weren't the typical profile of the Venture for America fellow, Teach for America at 36.
I mean, I'm 4 years older than JW, I think. So that, I was the old man of that group, but the kids took me in.
Yeah, that's great. Good for you for doing that. All right, a great way to get in touch with, if you want to fix something, go dig in and find out what's really going on.
Yeah.
Well, so both of you talk a little bit about Okay, how did you get in the investing side of the business, Matt?
By the good graces of Raymond Harvard, if we're being honest. So for those who don't know, Raymond really kind of stepped up and decided that we needed an early stage venture capital fund. Mickey and I had been talking about it, just on a much smaller scale, just based on our ability to fundraise and the Rolodex that we owned at the time. And I got a call actually from somebody that's here that said, Raymond Harvard's thinking about doing something similar to what you're talking about. Would you have lunch with them? And I thought this is a really nice way of Raymond telling us he was putting us out of business. And I thought that was really magnanimous to take us out to lunch and tell us, gee, sorry, fellas, but I got this. But in the course of that conversation, we realized pretty quickly a lot of what he wanted to do, a lot of what we were thinking about doing, kind of in the broader philosophical sense, was perfectly aligned. So I brazenly said, well, why don't we just run it for you? And so went through the process and started having the opportunity to work with him. And then we went out and did kind of the fundraising roadshow and the whole 9 yards. And then next thing you know, we're investors now, or at least running an investment management wing of that. And I joke around, but this is very true. We said this to Raymond early on. Mickey and I are not VCs. We're not investors. We're not investment bankers. Right? That's not our background. But what our background is we have a passion for working with and working in very early stage companies. And so if you're going to put money towards an investment at that stage, you really need to think about what are you doing post-investment to help them. And it's not just stuff that we're doing, it's stuff that our advisory board is doing, that our investors are doing, that the community is doing. Right. And that's really been, I think, the part that's made even the early stuff that we've done successful, is just the fact that we've had such good community support. Right. People just kind of, I think, intuitively get it, right. And see the need. So. Right.
I don't know, my answer is a lot simpler. I ran out of good ideas 15 years ago, so my odds of being a startup founder were pretty limited. And then, but back to the point, when Matt and I started having these conversations originally about why we wanted to launch a small fund. We were going to do $5-7 million fund. Nobody's getting rich on a $5 to $7 million fund. You do it out of the love of the game. It's because we identified a lot of activity starting to happen in and around Birmingham in the startup ecosystem, where people were out raising kind of small friends and family rounds from 10 people. They'd raise $150,000, build a prototype, start getting some traction, but we were seeing them get stuck after that. So there was nothing to kind of catalyze them to kind of that more significant $3 to $5 million round of funding. And so the idea for us was, are we the right people? Are we the people that can actually take them and help them get there to build this fund to do it? And I think, we thought so. And kind of to Matt's point, we thought we were out of business pretty quickly, but it worked out well with Raymond. And with the rest of the investors, it's actually been a really great partnership. And to Matt's point, so much of this has been a community thing. It's not Matt and I, it's Matt and I, it's our investors, it's people that serve on our advisory board. We have 5 members there. It's other entrepreneurs in the community. This has been a Birmingham community, Alabama State effort.
Okay. So although you say you're not venture investors,
yeah,
venture capitalists, although you are now, effectively.
It's what the business card says.
But what attracted you to the startup, that entrepreneurial space in particular, versus something much less risky?
Yeah.
For instance, later stage companies, but why this seed early?
I know for me that goes back to when we started USHIP, when I was still in business school back in 2004. I stayed with the company for 7 years. I was the first of the 3 founders that left. We had 120 employees. We're doing 10, 15 million in revenue. I got bored, if you can believe it. I mean, it was my company, but it wasn't an early stage startup. I like it when you're kind of holding things together with duct tape. And if you guys come out and meet some of the founders that we funded, sometimes that's what they're doing. They're just trying to get through the next week and figure out how they're going to make payroll and grind out a couple more sales. That's where I think I do best. I'm not great at running a large company. I don't really have an interest in that. So for me, this seed stage is where I get the most excited.
Yeah. It's pretty much all I've ever done. I mean, even when I worked with Dish Network, my job was to work with individual business owners, retailers themselves. Like, I didn't work with the manufacturers. Everything that I did, it was funny, I had this kind of realization that even when I worked for a big company, I was actually working for those entrepreneurs. I mean, that was my job, and my success was tied to their success. And so if I really think about it, I don't know that I've ever done anything that wasn't entrepreneurial. So maybe I just don't know any better.
Yeah.
I'd say there's also something pretty awesome about working with entrepreneurs. And Matt and I, by the way, we do this stuff with the fund, but we work with companies coming out of Rev and out of Co-Starters and all different parts of the entrepreneurial spectrum. When you watch an entrepreneur have that first sale or have that first little bit of success or raise the first big round of capital, it's an incredibly satisfying thing to see people kind of start to achieve those goals that they've set, because it is really, really hard.
So
I've been there.
talk about, because your business is more than just the futures fund too, right? You have some advisory and consulting business as well. Maybe tell the group a little bit about what that does.
Yeah. So obviously when you're a small business or an entrepreneur startup, you never have enough money, enough time, enough resources, enough expertise, right? But other than that, you're great, right?
Somebody do so well.
That's right. So, trying to help fill in some of the resource and the expertise gap, right, either directly through advisory and consulting, type work, or just by connecting dots. There's a lot of times when we don't engage professionally or for a fee with entrepreneurs because simply we may not be the best fit, or we can find them resources that they don't yet need to pay for. And that makes them a better, stronger company in the long run. And kind of tagging what Mickey said, why do you do that, right? So I had a really good mentor when I started the consulting business, and I said, here's kind of what I'm thinking about doing, this is what I want to do, and he kind of reared back in his chair for 30 seconds, and I thought, oh, right, I just said something really stupid, and he said, well, I think the work will be really rewarding, I also think you might be broke within a year. We made it past a year, and it was a struggle at times, but one of the best things is you think about, when you work with large companies, you think about, hey, I made a 2% improvement in the profit margin, which is fantastic, and that could be worth millions of dollars and hundreds of jobs. So not to downplay that, but I still to this day, the greatest compliment I ever got was I was actually helping one of my first clients wind her business down. She was closing. And she was really worried about displacing her customers and her employees. And we spent a day together really thinking through the strategy of how to do that and all that stuff. And of course she had no money, so I ended up doing it for free. But she came in the next morning and I literally did not recognize her. I mean, she walked right up to me and I looked at her and I said, wow, you look completely different. And I was like, and I did the typical male thing. Did you change your hair? Or are you wearing something? She looks at me square in the eye and she goes, no, I slept for 6 whole hours last night for the first time in 3 years. And I thought to myself, that's why we do it, right? And that's the impact that you can have. It's on a much deeper, more personal, more human level. And I think that all of the frustrations and all the things and all the risks that come along with that, those little times really start to carry you over in the times that it gets a little bit tougher.
Yeah. Okay. So, and maybe this is getting into some of your secret sauce here, but talk a little bit about some of the characteristics you've seen over your careers about what are the successful characteristics of startups? What are the ones that do well and why? Sort of that distinguishes the best from the rest.
So we could probably be up here for a couple hours talking about this. But the way I think about it, this will kind of sound counterintuitive. The best entrepreneurs and the people that I see being successful over and over again are not big risk takers. They're very good at identifying the risks that they're going to take and figuring out how they're going to mitigate those risks and how they're going to make and de-stress the problems that they foresee coming up in their business. So the ones that can foresee the problems, they know how to mitigate those going forward. Then this is the boring answer, but they're really data heavy. I love entrepreneurs that pour into the data and can tell the story of their company through what the data is telling them, what their customers are telling them. The discipline to do that early on, especially in high-tech kind of growth companies, very few entrepreneurs do and very few do well. So if you can combine those two, you increase your chances of success tremendously.
Yeah, I would add adaptability to that, which is when all of your best laid plans end up in the trash bin,
right,
what do you do next? How do you take that information, how do you take that data, even when it's not great, and what do you do with that to turn it around, or how do you change that corner? So much of the stuff that we're doing early stage, there's the old saying, there's a pony in the pile. Well, we joke around and say there's a pivot in the pile, right? So then everything else that you're doing, there's a pivot in your business in there somewhere. Sometimes it's slight, sometimes it's significant. But the ability to navigate that really says a lot for how are you kind of as a founder or as a founding team kind of future-proofed against whatever's coming next that may be out of your control.
Yeah, and I think that goes back, you probably hear people talking about all the time, nobody writes business plans anymore, and that may seem crazy. Of course you have to write a business plan. If you're IBM, you can write a business plan for what your next business unit is. If you're a startup, everything you're putting in that business plan is a guess. It's going to be obsolete in 2 weeks. So don't waste the time doing that. Instead, identify what the assumptions behind your business are, how you're going to test those and learn and become more disciplined. Your chances of success go up.
So building on that, you in my introduction to you all, which I think we sent out to our membership, is this: identify the critical customer problem and work towards the product market fit. So that sounds very cool, but in plain English, what does that mean?
Validate that there's actually a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, just because you personally have had the problem doesn't mean that it's a widespread problem that's big enough worth solving, right? So we get these submissions into the fund all the time where it's like, well, my wife and I are having this problem, or my son and I have had this problem, or my daughter and I have had this problem, and it sounds like a very important problem to them. But then when you ask them, who else have you talked to, who else have you validated this with, how big a problem is this, how is it currently being addressed, you start getting into almost a lean kind of business canvas type methodology, then it starts to fall apart, right? Which is, oh, well, I hadn't thought about this, and just the 3 friends I talked to told me this was a good idea. And that's the tough part, because you may be right, but you very well could be wrong. And so I think that that's a big part of understanding what that problem is, and then understanding how are you going to build a product or a service that's going to address that in a unique way that is not only defendable but scalable. Because if you're going to throw 90 hours a week at this for 3 years straight, it better be lucrative enough and it better be a big enough market for you to spend that chunk of your life working on it.
Yeah, that's good. Very good. All right. No, I mean, so I would just, sorry, piggyback on that. There are 2 books that I love about startups that I give almost every founder. And people will stare at you a little bit funny when you read the first one. It's called Talking to Humans. And they wonder if you just have a problem with interacting with people. But it's a little pamphlet. You can download it online. And it teaches you how to do customer interviews. And by that we mean before you've gone out and built a product, who have you gone out and talked to? Which leads you to the second book, The Mom Test. Who's the person you should never go talk to your startup about? Your mother. Your mother loves you. She loves everything that you do, right? And it's this idea, and we talk to founders about this all the time. I want you to go out and talk to unfriendlies, people who don't know you, don't have anything invested in you. And you'd be amazed how many have never done that about the problem they're trying to solve. So there's pretty good research on these methods and the fact that they work.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many entrepreneurs will go out and find that. You can Google this, it's out there, you know.
It's much more fun to build than it is to research and plan. Let's be
Yeah,
honest, right?
yeah.
I mean, just like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to build this, code, and I'm going to do this stuff, and I'm going to hire these people, and I'm going to, damn the torpedoes, right? But the reality is, if you haven't done the groundwork to get to that point, you might just be spinning your wheels.
Yeah, and I think there's a tendency to get caught up in this very formal focus groups and all, rather than, hey, I've learned this well from Will Wright. We talk a lot about this at Protective, is, hey, just go down to the local Panera Bread and Starbucks, whatever, start asking people
Exactly
the
right.
question.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I had a student working on a grocery app, and she would go camp out at Walmart and Whole Foods and walk up to people while they were shopping and go, can I walk with you for 5 minutes and ask you a few questions about your experience? She did 100 interviews and learned what she shouldn't build.
Yeah.
Right, so.
All right, so let's pivot back to the Futures Fund. So you talked about the genesis. Talk about a few of the investors, and in particular, Mr. Barkley, who's one of those investors, right?
Sir Charles, yes.
I mean, we're hanging out every weekend. He's got us out at the house. It's great.
Charles Barkley, by the way, for those keeping track at home.
No, Charles has been fantastic, and we were talking a little bit about the first meeting we had with him, and really sharp, loves the state of Alabama, cares very, very deeply about seeing this place be successful. I grew up kind of with an image of Charles as the bad boy of basketball, and then you meet him, and I don't want to let the secret out if you haven't, probably one of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your life, makes time for everybody. And so when Raymond brought him in, we weren't sure if this was something he'd be interested in, but he had made kind of some noise about wanting to invest, especially in female startups and people of color, and just didn't have a vehicle with which to do it. They weren't really, his team isn't prepared to do that. So when Raymond brought him in, we kind of talked to him about it and what our vision was, and it lined up. So he's certainly been great to get publicity about what the fund does. He does typically stay pretty arm's length from us, but he's been wonderful to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah, the best story about that is he was in a room that we were kind of pitching for, and we'd gone through about 40 minutes of presentation on fund structure and all of this
Really
stuff.
exciting stuff.
Really exciting stuff, put you to sleep. He stayed awake the whole time. But so we go through this whole thing, and he looks over and he has one question. He looks at us and he goes, "Do you have kids?" I said, "Yeah, I have at the time an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old." And Mickey said, "I have a daughter. She's actually turning 2 today. Her name is Maya." Right? So no big deal. That was the question. We go another half an hour of meeting, and he's walking out of the room as everybody's kind of, the meeting's breaking up. He stops, literally turns around, looks at Mickey and said, "Hey, Mickey, tell Maya I said happy birthday." And I was struck by that for a bunch of reasons, but not the least of which is he didn't have to remember it was her birthday. He didn't have to remember her name. And that's what really mattered to him, right? When it all said and done, we're talking about investing large sums of money. And what he really cared about was, what does this mean to this person's family? Does this person have a family that's relying on them to make successful business choices? And that's really what he was asking in a very kind of subtle, nonchalant way. And I tell that story a lot because I think it speaks a lot to his character, as well as to what he was prioritizing in that.
Right. So, talk about a lot of money you were investing. Again, how big is the fund? How many investors are there?
Yep. So there's it's $25 million fund. It's a closed fund for those out there who like the technical talk. But it's basically, we have 7 investors, 6 of which are kind of publicly known. 1 is chosen not to be. But Protective Life is one of those. Benny LaRussa, make sure I don't miss everybody. Rob and Turner Burton, Ruffner Page, Raymond Harbert, Charles Barkley. Who did I miss? Did I get everybody? I think that's everybody.
Yep.
I think that's everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's named.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I do want to say, because we hear this, 25 million sounds like a lot of money. In the world of venture capital, it's actually a very small fund. It is the biggest in the state and the biggest maybe ever. But what that means is, and this can be hard for people to count, we'll make maybe 5 investments a year. So we've seen how many startups now? How many local?
Last I checked, 163. We've looked at 163 teams. Yeah, and approximately 100 of those have been within the state of Alabama.
So typical size of your investment?
Usually anywhere between $250,000 to $750,000. We also syndicate with other groups. So the one thing that makes us unique, we're a seed stage fund, but we also lead all of our investments. So that means we do all the due diligence, we set the deal terms, we bring other investors in where need be, which is actually quite rare in the seed stage world. So that was something that from Raymond we had to be able to do.
Yeah, and that's important too, because if you know anything about investing, especially in early stage, it's really important to have what they consider a lead investor. Then tends to have other investors will follow on behind that. A, because it's easier, and B, because there's a little bit of a credibility factor that goes with that. And in early stage, it's often hard to find a lead investor. You can spend months and months and months to get a lead investor, and then once you get that lead investor, the rest of the investment comes very, very quickly.
Okay, so 3 investments so far?
Yes.
Yes. Talk to the group a little bit about those, what those have been, what the businesses are about, some of their characteristics.
Yeah, so they're kind of all over the place. One, when you start a fund, some are focused on SaaS products, some in healthcare, some in, cybersecurity. We made the argument that we don't really know who Birmingham or Alabama is as a startup community yet, so it probably would be a mistake to get too linear into one industry. 3 years ago, nobody would have said B2C consumer in the grocery delivery side, right? And that's probably been one of the biggest exits maybe ever out of here, if not the biggest. So we said, let's be somewhat industry agnostic. Obviously, we try to play in stuff where we feel like we can be strategic. But we've made 3, and I'll let you kind of take Doc Wellington. Junco, which maybe you've heard of. It's a diversity and inclusion AI platform that works in the human resources space to help increase the number of diversity candidates that come through to Fortune 5,000 companies. So she's out of Tel Aviv originally, came to Atlanta with Techstars in 2016, and then was going to open her company in San Francisco because that's where you go to start a big AI company, and within 6 months was miserable, couldn't afford it, was having trouble raising money, and we got introduced to her about a year ago and started that process. She's from Tel Aviv. She calls Birmingham her kibbutz because it feels like her community, because this community has rallied around her, and it's been incredible. You want to do Doc Wellington?
Yeah, so Doc Wellington is founded by Sam Eskelson. Some of you may know Sam. He started rural urgent care. And basically what that's doing is it's trying to provide direct primary care to people on a subscription basis that eliminates co-pays and kind of high deductible plans for a flat fee every month that allows them telemedicine, virtual medicine, and in-person office visits at affiliated clinics. So he's just now getting that ramped up and started. And then the third one is Case Status. Lauren Sturdivant is the founder along with Andy Sievers. And they are actually out of Charleston via Atlanta, went through Techstars as well in Atlanta, and we poached them from Atlanta. And they work on the communications and marketing side specifically for plaintiffs' attorneys and personal injury cases. So for those of you who don't spend much time in that market, a plaintiff attorney could have 100+ clients simultaneously at all various stages of their case. And one of the biggest complaints they get at the bar is, I don't know where my case is because my attorney's not communicating with you. Trust me, they'd like to, but they're paid on contingency, so they're not billing by the hour. So automating communications, keeping people up to speed, helping them understand where their case is a big part of that. They've recently launched, they're making some inroads here recently. And what's nice about this, and I think also we always like to point out, is that we have one that was here and then two that we recruited. So Case Status from Atlanta and Junko from San Francisco. So we do think that that's a really strong signal to show not only is it capable for us to bring in these startups from other places, but they're excited to be here.
Right, which is another one of your objectives, right? Is to attract startups to Alabama.
So we can only invest in companies that are based here or willing to relocate here.
Yep.
So if you can't do those things, then we're not going to invest in it.
Okay, so you said you've seen a lot of pitches. What's been the mix between those that are already resident in Alabama in some shape or form and those that have come from outside Alabama?
You might know that better.
Yeah, it's about 2/3 in-state versus out-of-state.
Right.
Now, keep in mind that, there was a lot of kind of stored demand for a fund like this.
Yeah.
So right out of the gates, we were just, the floodgates opened. And so we got a lot that were inbound that are kind of been on the sidelines for a number of years. And so we've kind of worked our way through that. That's actually not a huge number compared to other kind of ecosystems. Now, really, it's focusing more on kind of the more proactive, in-state and out-of-state. So, we don't have a set definition of how many in-state versus how many we're recruiting, because so much of this has to do with timing and getting to a company that needs the kind of investment that we're going to make, that can take advantage of what we have in Alabama, and that we're getting them at the right time. So we geographically, we're less reliant on hitting some sort of quota there. I'd like to see more kind of homegrown talent that we're able to invest in, and hopefully that happens in the future.
But what's great is it was kind of a little bit of a guess on our part that we'd be able to recruit.
Right.
Having grown up in the Austin ecosystem, I talked to a founder in San Francisco the other day. He's paying $4,000 a month to live in a room, not an apartment, a room with 3 other people. There are entrepreneurs that are fed up with going out to the coast, going to places where it's way too expensive. We have a heck of a story to sell here. And, we get founders on the phone and they're skeptical the minute we start it.
Sure.
By the end of the conversation, they're going, when do we come down to visit? Right. And so this community, and I said that earlier, and you look at the work Brittany Somerville does over at SHIP with the Birmingham Bound program, this community steps up when people come here. And we really do have a hell of a message to share. And I think we're going to be in a position where we're actually turning founders away that would like to come, but we just don't have the capital.
So what have been some of those advantages that have been, as you have those kind of conversations, that have been attractive besides?
I mean, the cost of living is the easy one, right? I mean, when I told that guy what I paid for my 2,400 square foot house, he almost hung up on me, right? They just can't believe it. I think they realize there is a lot of talent here. I think they realize they're going to get support from the mayor's office, because they come and connect. The business community comes and connects. The Tech Birmingham community comes and connects. You want to pick up on some of these?
Yeah.
It's been really not the hardest sell.
Yeah, we typically get 3 reactions. One is that it's an incredibly accessible community.
Right.
I mean, I joke around and say, everybody knows the Kevin Bacon game, 6 degrees of separation. We're like half a Kevin Bacon game here, right? You're like 3 degrees separated from anybody in town. And when people...
That's not the same as being related.
No. I'm not stepping on that one. Yeah. So that's part of it, and I think part of what comes out of those interactions is the second part, which is they feel a real authenticity here. So the startup community here is very transparent, is very welcoming, and is not skeptical of people coming from other places. And I can't emphasize enough how important that is when somebody comes in here and feels like this is a community that wants me to be here, that is interested in my success, and win, lose, or draw is pulling for me. And then the authenticity comes out when they say they're going to do something, they do it. And they're not getting that in their home market a lot of times. They get a lot of lip service. Oh, we're so happy to have you here. And it's like, okay, well, get me 3 meetings with top executives in these, customer segments. And it's like, crickets, right? But here, when somebody says, oh yeah, I'll do that, they'll do it. And you don't have to harangue them to do it. That's just part of the culture. And then I think the third thing is this is funny. We got this from some of the Tel Aviv contingent. They go, when people here ask you, how are you doing? They actually want to know the answer. And when they say things like, I hope you have a great day, they say it and they actually smile.
Yeah, we actually just hosted through Birmingham. Brittany, through that program that they're doing, brought 4 founders in from different parts of the country at a much earlier stage. And 2 of the guys were, I think they're both originally from New Jersey, and they were out in San Francisco, and they'd never been to the South. And the one guy, we just kept hearing him on the phone, and this guy was just intense all the time. And he got here, and he was here for about 12 hours. His partner goes, I've never seen this guy so relaxed in my life. Consequently, we may be real close to bringing it.
Yeah, that would be good.
But it was, that's just who we are.
We had 4 teams that came in for that event, and I really do strongly believe that we had 4 people that came out of there strongly considering Birmingham and Alabama as home base. And I think 3 of them had never spent any time here.
Okay, so we've heard the good.
Yep.
Now what about disadvantages? So what's the pushback? Why don't we have a bigger? Why aren't we San Francisco?
Well, first of all, I don't want to be San Francisco.
Correct.
So let's all just agree on that.
That's true.
I don't want to be Austin. I don't want to be Atlanta. I don't want to be Nashville. I steal this line from Deion Gordon all the time, but we just need to be the best version of Birmingham that we can be, and the best version of Alabama that we can be. I think emulating other places is okay. I think also learning from their mistakes is really important. So I think that's first and foremost. I think just on the basic side of it, and I think these are universal truths, everybody's struggling for talent, right? Everybody's struggling for ability to scale and having those and access to capital. We have capital here.
Scale from a customer standpoint, or
just
from capital?
Growth, yeah. So it could be from user acquisition, it could be from revenue acquisition. A lot of it is just it has to do with access to capital, right? We are still woefully underrepresented for female entrepreneurs, for people of color, immigrants, right? We are not there yet, and that is a universal truth, and I mean that nationally. I think I read a stat that less than 10% of all companies that were funded last year had either a or the female founder. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, it's half the population. Right? And so we really need to be aware of those things. And I think that those are true for us, but I think that that's true across the board. Now, we probably have some more kind of unique challenges or some things that are more specific to Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I would say is we have to be patient. I was in Austin for 10 years. That didn't happen overnight. Austin was a small college town until 3 companies kind of hit it big. Dell and hardware, Silicon Labs and chips, and then Trilogy Software and Enterprise Software. And so you had exits with all 3 of those that made a lot of people rich in 3 very specific industries that filtered down into that community. Now, you look at what's happened. Folks coming from Theranest, and you guys saw Shagan's going to be here. Certainly what's happened out of Shift and the talent they're going to continue to bring in. All of these things over the next 10 years will continue to contribute and build our ecosystem. It's up to us to kind of manage it so it doesn't get out of control. But I think we just have to have patience and know that it's not going to happen overnight. So that leads to a challenge for us. I mean, I don't want to say deal flow because I think we're doing well with that, but there is a truth that we don't see the deals that guys out in Silicon Valley are seeing. Right? We're going to have to take some shots on founders that probably wouldn't get a look out there. And that's okay. But that's happening all throughout the Southeast. There's a myth, and to your point about capital, that money's just flowing in Atlanta and Nashville and Charleston. They have the same problems we do. They may be a little further along, but it's an issue all over the Southeast.
But I think your point about Shift and Theranest, I mean, those are great success stories.
And what Chad Troll's done?
It's really fantastic. And some other entrepreneurs that are building some real formidable companies in town here. So, all right, I'm going to open it up to some questions from the group, yes.
You know, a lot of people in here that are a little bit older than you are, have a son up there about 100 years. I think we need energy like yours to be here for another 100. So I'd like to ask you this. What could we do as members of this club, individually or collectively, 3 things to help you guys and this community?
Great question, Frank. Go.
3 things, wow. Thank you for offering 3 things.
Yeah. I might do one.
Yeah. No, I think part of it is continue to be advocates for this community, right? As you are as members of Kiwanis, as you are in your other memberships, civic, religious, political, otherwise, keep advocating for this state. Keep advocating for the fact that we have for a long time almost appeared to have this 90% discount that we thought we were playing from, right? And I just don't buy that. I think that's nonsense. I think we have every bit of strength that we can leverage as anybody else, so I think that that's one of the first things. I think the second thing is help your communities and help your organization take a long view, right? So this is not something, to Mickey's point about startups and this ecosystem and all these things. You see these articles that come out and go, well, Birmingham's going to be the next Silicon Valley of the South. Silicon Valley took 100 years to become Silicon Valley. And before it was Silicon Valley, it was a farming community, right? So take the long view and understand that what we're doing now may not show immediate benefit, but 10 years from now, this could look completely different as far as the landscape goes. Do you want to say the third
I
one?
kind of have a third. I mean, come out and get involved. The great thing about startup communities, everybody's welcome. And even if you don't feel like you know anything about startups or you just want to learn about it, if there's an event going on in the community, show up. The more people we can get, the more energy we can get around it. I tell people I lived in Austin for almost 10 years. Saturday afternoon, Sunday at 5 o'clock, walking around downtown in the startup areas, it's alive. People come to the events. There's a lot of participation.
And I also would add this, I mean, to the point about kind of the age thing. So I can't tell you a single entrepreneur, young entrepreneur that I really respect that doesn't have a much older mentor. That they quote regularly, that they spend time with, that they make, that is a central part of their business planning. Not a one that I can think of.
Other questions? Yes?
So how does one submit proposals to you, and what's your recommendation on getting into sitting down?
So a couple of things. So info@alabamafutures.com. That's where everything goes. As far as everyone who submits gets reviewed, everyone who gets submitted and reviewed gets a response. And usually in some amount of detail. Here's what looks good, here's some additional information we need, it's not a fit for us, here's why. A lot of the times in this deal flow that we're talking about, sometimes it's too early, sometimes it's too late. We really have to hit kind of a sweet spot in timing. So those ones that are too early, what resources can we provide? Who else can we get them in contact with? For example, a lot of times they're in the concept stage. They're a perfect candidate for the EDPA's Launchpad competition. They might be a good fit for Velocity. They may be a good fit for the SBDC. All of those things are resources, and so not just saying yes or no, we want to try to disposition those companies in the best, most positive and resourceful way possible.
Okay. Another question. Alton.
What's the one thing that sort of jumps out at you when you see these applications that come that make you, that really pique your interest? So I want to really dig into this a little bit more. What's that one thing?
I don't know that there's a one thing for me. It seems like it's a little bit, well, it's a little bit of a fingerprint. I looked at one recently that looked really stupid, if I'm being honest. Just the concept was just really there wasn't anything there. But then I really started thinking about it. I started thinking about the context of the market it was trying to be in. And I was like, man, this is so simple. That's why I thought it was dumb. But the brilliance is in the simplicity of it. And I started really digging in and doing some research. I was like, man, they're really on to something that nobody else has looked at because it's very niche, and it's very specific, and it's very simple. So I would just counter in saying it's like a fingerprint. Everything's a little bit different, and different things will pique your interest at different times.
Yeah, I would say we have to be careful not to rush, because I've had that same issue. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to say what this company is, and you're going to think it's the dumbest thing ever. They take a picture of a child's foot next to a credit card, and they can better size children's shoes. Sounds like the worst idea ever. Turns out that's a massive problem for Amazon and Zappos that they spend millions and millions on. and they're figuring it out. And it was 2 women up in Philadelphia. That was another one. They had no interest in Alabama until the end of the call. They're like, wait a minute, we'll come down. But you know, you have to just make sure you take the time. The idea may need to be fleshed out a little bit, but yeah, just have patience.
All right, one more question. Chuck.
Guys, I'm interested in how you work and also the kind of work that Alabama Capital Network does and other players in this landscape. Give us a sense of the scale of that landscape and how much bigger it should be.
I mean, it could be infinitely bigger. I mean, really, the sky's the limit as far as the total size of it. Again, this is not a place that's wanting for capital and private investment. I think if you really knew all of the people that were investing very quietly, you'd be shocked at the total amount of money that's actually being invested. I think organizing it in a fund is helpful for a couple of reasons. So we're playing the role of being a captured fund with a timetable that will deploy capital within a specific period of time, whereas you have other capital that's organized as a family office that could deploy as little or as much as they want over whatever time period they want, and based on the investment or sectors that they're excited about. You have ACN, which effectively acts as almost an investor deal flow kind of consortium. So it allows people to look at vetted ideas that are coming out there or business concepts that are looking for funding, and then those members decide whether or not they want to participate as individual members. All of that plays a role. All of that is trying to create this kind of continuum of funding that's really important, and where the most successful ecosystems you see kind of cradle to grave type financing, right? So you get angel investors that are saying, I don't think this idea is fully vetted, but I really believe in this founder, so here's $15,000 to get something built. And then they get 2 or 3 of those. And then they get into seed stage, which is more the place that we're playing in. And then you get in the later stage into the growth capital, and we already have players that are doing that in this market, in the growth stage. Creating that continuum that can get them to a Series A of a multi-million-dollar raise. That's how we get companies here, we keep companies here, we grow companies here. And then to Mickey's point, then they start, the people who seeded out from them, right, start starting their own.
And I have kind of another theory to close on that, but before that, Chuck, you're right. Everyone should be a sustaining member of WBHL. So if you aren't already, you made me to say that.
See you later.
I'm kind of developing this theory, and I'm learning this as we go to other markets across the Southeast, that there's not going to be a Silicon Valley of the Southeast. Not one city is going to win. It's not going to be Nashville or Atlanta, which has corporate issues. It's not going to be Birmingham. I think we have to look at the Southeast almost as a collective, and there are going to be certain areas where certain investments do better, certain areas where we have to syndicate follow-on investment from a couple different cities. I think the good news with that is it means nobody ends up looking like Silicon Valley or Austin, where you can't drive through the city. I think the challenge is getting everybody to start working together, but I'm starting to see some of those walls, the traditional competitive walls, especially among investors, break down. I think that could be something interesting to watch as we look at how we're going to keep companies in the South.
Matt, Mickey, thanks for being with us. Let me quickly talk about upcoming programs. Next week, Athletic Awards program. Rick Davis will also be here to speak. Rick is practices sports and entertainment law at Wallace Jordan. That's me. He played football in the Alabama 1973 National Championship team, as well as professionally for the Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs. He also represents players and coaches today. So I think it'll be a really interesting combination of seeing all these kids get these awards, as well as hearing from Rick. So then the day after Memorial Day, no meeting, don't show up. And then June 4th, we're still actively working on a speaker. And then June 4th, definitely want to be here to hear Josh Carpenter, Alex Flaxbart speak about the opportunity zones emerging in Alabama. You don't want to miss that. Thanks for being here today. We are adjourned.